Hi, and welcome to the Justice for Georgia podcast. My name is Johnny.
And I'm Mr. Ambitious. And today we're going to be talking about John Lewis, one of the icons of the civil rights movement, and how he affected change in the fight for justice in the everybody community. I would say just the black community, but the reach and the effects of what he has done has affected a lot of marginalized communities.
Exactly. To go from a young college student protesting to serving 17 terms as a congressman, that's huge. That's a big jump, and like what he was able to accomplish and where he came from. And I think you mentioned it before, to quote the great Mr. Ambitious, that John Lewis was basically like, what he did was like MLK's dream, to like get into government, get into a position of power, and be able to implement change there.
Right, and so much of what King said and did was strategic. A lot of the strategy and the process for winning that he was aiming for, a lot of people don't give him credit for. We want to talk about the dream and the conscience of character, but the part that really was what he was going for was actually doing things that affected real change. And one of the aspects of that strategy was having someone in position in political office. So John Lewis demonstrated the possibilities of that being done.
Exactly. So it was just a huge accomplishment because we'll go into his background too to explain why it was so big. He was born in the 40s, just like my grandma. His parents were sharecroppers, just like my grandma. She told me like our whole family, everybody was like sharecropping in the 40s. And sharecropping, for those that don't know, is, so there was slavery where, they owned you, you were property, you couldn't run away, you weren't paid anything, all that type of stuff. Even if you ran away, they could say, hey, I have paperwork showing I own you, so you can't do that. Whereas sharecropping is like, okay, I don't own you, I'm not breeding you, you could run off if you want to, there's nothing legally I can do. However, instead of me owning another person, it'll be me using financial manipulation.
Right.
It's like, legally I have to pay you. So here you go, here's $1. Oh, but you can't afford to pay rent anywhere, so you need to live on my land. Okay, so I'll take money out for that. Oh, you can't afford to go out and buy your own food or anything, so I'll give you food, I'm gonna take money out for that. So you end up, from $1 or whatever, you end up with 2 cents or something. They just take all that. Exactly, yeah, they take everything from you, so that way you're stuck on them. So it's technically, that's the technicality that's really important. It's technically not slavery, but it's so similar that, it pretty much is for all intents and purposes. So that's the background he's come from. His parents were sharecroppers. He was the third of 10 children, which back in the day, that's just
was cranking
normal.
them out.
They cranking them out.
They found something they liked, and they liked it a lot.
Exactly.
So 10 kids was not that. I mean, like especially in like the South, with big families, they were kind of used to that. So for him to be in a large family during a time when sharecropping is their main source of income, you can imagine that it is going to make for a different kind of breeding ground, for different ideals and culture and everything for himself. So.
Exactly. And he grew up not in Troy, but outside of Troy. So where he was at, it was mostly black. It was pretty much almost all black people, living in this area. And it wasn't really until he got a little older, he started going into Troy, that he started seeing the whites only signs and, colored only signs, that type of stuff like that. And he said as soon as he saw it, he felt the need to, say something about it, like, this is wrong.
Right.
And he had family members that tell him like, no, stay quiet, don't say anything, because some people, they want to keep the peace. And we have to remember at this time, black people were getting terrorized for anything or for no reason at all.
Right. I mean, you're talking about like getting your ass whooped for literally drinking at the wrong fountain. Like, exactly. What kind of nonsense? If that happened today, we'd be looking like it was crazy, but it's still stuff happening today that's still racist that we don't say nothing about, but it's along the same line. So this took him to a place where he mentally and emotionally was like, we have to do something about this. Now, like, not many people felt that call like he did. And it started from a young age. As a teenager, he was already going out to do something about the fight. So John Lewis started young, and all the way to the end of his life, he was fighting that fight.
Exactly. And I think a lot of black people get put in that situation, and usually you come up with two solutions to the problem. When you see segregation, and you see how they're treating you as a second-class citizen and blah blah blah. So John Lewis had more of the pretty much similar approach to MLK and some of the other civil rights leaders, where he was thinking like, it needs to be fully integrated. Yeah, we should be eating at the same restaurants, using the same bathrooms, blah blah. It shouldn't be any whites only, colored only signs or anything like that. And then you had other people like Marcus Garvey that saw it was just like, no, we just need to be completely separated, clean cut. And what we have to remember is that when these people like Marcus Garvey thought about stuff like that, they had never seen integration. They had only seen it separated and the racism and the violence. They just assumed that it would never work. And when you look at it from their point of view, you get a better understanding of why they thought that way. They didn't have the privilege like we do to see integration and everything like that the way we've seen it our whole lives.
And to be honest with you, a lot of people would say that we were better off before integration. I mean, a lot of the resources that were given to us were already secondhand, but now it's the system intentionally making them secondhand tools that we have to keep us a few steps behind. So they both have valid points, but you also got to remember John Lewis came from a heavily religious family.
Oh yeah, that, yep.
So that made a big influence. He wanted to see the Jesus in everybody else that he saw in that book, where everybody can work together, and this is the way that he felt actually made it possible.
Exactly. And when I say that, like when people, they want it completely separated, I 100% totally understand why, because of what they had seen. They just felt like it wasn't possible for it to happen. So I get it. I completely understand it. And we've seen attempts at it that worked out pretty well until something happened. Black Wall Street and things of that nature. That wasn't the only black business mecca. There were plenty of them as well. So I definitely understand it. And another problem with integration is it's not full integration where you can't discriminate against my children because my children are in the same classroom as your children. Instead, it's as usual, when there's progress, there's always some type of slick attempts to circumvent that progress. So they say segregation is illegal now. Oh man, we have to put, white racists, they're thinking like, oh man, we have to put the white kids and black kids together in the schools. And then they start doing things like redlining. So it's like, oh, well, black kids are allowed to go to school, but there's none here because we're not letting black families buy any properties in this school district. So that's the slick stuff they started doing. After that, you see the impact of it today, where there's still some areas that are, 60, 70, 80% white or 60, 70, 80% black. It's just segregation light, even though it's called integration, because technically, yeah, there's some black and white students going to the same school, but you're talking about huge majorities in this school of white, huge majority of this school of black. So it's a sneaky segregation attempt that's been used, so now they can still give us the secondhand stuff, so we're not avoiding the issues that integration is supposed to avoid.
And so now they've given us racism light, this diet version of it, that's basically instead of black versus white, is red versus blue. So now you got the redlining happening under the watch of the Republicans, which the whole story behind the Republicans and Democrats, that's an ironic just twist right there.
Definitely.
Democratic Party was started by the KKK. So you now got them being so disenfranchised because they saw that racism wasn't working for them, that they started reaching out to minorities to get help to get elected under FDR. And so then you fast forward to now, what do you got? You got the racist group now is the Republican Party, and you're seeing it's not working. And so now, what do we have? It's almost history repeating itself. So you got a racist president telling us that it's okay to be racist. And these people are believing it, blowing up trucks in broad daylight in Tennessee and having their pictures taken as if they just, robbed a liquor store or something. Let him been black, Arab, anything. Boy, every news channel been talking about it. Only thing you see on the news right now is a hole in the ground. We would have been seeing everything about this black dude's family. We would have been seeing everything. We would have saw his high school teacher that told him he could be anything, saying she's so disappointed. All kinds of crazy shit.
They would have somehow found marijuana in the system. Somehow. Even if it's just they only found, a hand or something, they would have somehow found marijuana in the system. It's a requirement.
He smelled it, yeah. He smells some marijuana, so apparently, black people can't do anything with these jazz cigarettes in the system. So whatever.
He was vaguely aware of its existence. That was just unacceptable. But another problem I see with the parties, I feel like now the Republican Party has become the upfront racist.
Oh yeah.
where they, it's pretty obvious, even though they're still using dog whistles. It's just too obvious. And then you have the Democratic Party, where I'm not gonna say everybody in the Democratic Party, there are some progressives in there. There are some. But then you see a lot of people in the Democratic Party, especially the ones in the powerful positions. They seem to be the ones that MLK was complaining about. They say, wait for another season, not right now. It's not the right time. I see a lot of that in the Democratic Party, and I find it unacceptable, to where it got to the point where it took till 2020 that you really saw mainstream news or any politicians seriously discussing reparations. Before that, it was always dismissed outright as something ridiculous, unnecessary. So I feel like we're still having an issue where, one blatantly racist party, the other one, this is not your season, not yet.
Right, and so if you tie all that together, what was intended to be done by John Lewis still needs to be done, which is people who are elected and put in position to carry out the different legislative things we need, so that not only on the cultural side we can affect change, but on the legal side. Because some people, they're just not going to do right unless you force them to, unfortunately. And we're not asking them to change their religion, we're not asking them to change how they live their life. We just don't want them to cause damage to our lives in the process of them living their life. So John Lewis went in under the influence of Martin Luther King telling him on the radio and during sit-ins and different things like that, you guys are heading in the right direction, you're going to help us make a change in this country. And he took that to heart. And so we even see that today. A lot of young people are jumping into the legal side, and the youngest ever elected official of color in many different areas across the country. Stockton, California, Detroit, Florida, all over the place. We have people taking up these different positions to help push forward a more, I'll say, integrated system of justice. We got a long way to go, but John Lewis was the first on a national level to get this accomplished, where other people could see that the door was open for them to do it too.
Exactly. And one thing he mentioned was that, they got the president to pass the Civil Rights Act, and then they went to the president and said, you have to pass the Voting Rights Act. And it was like, well, I already passed the Civil Rights Act, why do I need to pass a Voting Rights Act? It was like, well, okay, yeah, you passed that and it did some good things, but they're still preventing black people from voting. They're still doing it. John Lewis County, overwhelmingly black, but no black registered voters, because they were able to successfully keep them from even registering to vote. And I think it's interesting point that you see the voter suppression that's happening then. It is, I would say, it has softened, but it's still happening now when you're closing polling stations in predominantly black areas, and you're playing around with the polling station's times is going to be open at the last minute, or changing what the polling station is going to be at the last minute. So they're still doing it and disenfranchising us, but the techniques keep changing, and like you said, racism, like.
And it's ironic that you got like places like Houston, they only have one polling place for the entire city, for the main county. So you have where this great amount of black people could vote at, they're being suppressed to this day. This past election. Stacey Abrams having to do a national campaign to make it okay to vote in Georgia because of how bad it was. Now you got every other day the Secretary of State trying to explain to everybody they're not doing what they used to do. This isn't 60 years ago, 50. This is today that we're still having to face this. And we have a president who's encouraging people to help him cheat and claiming that the other side is cheating. You have, there were people blowing up mailboxes in Ohio full of votes that were supposed to go in to be counted. But they were claiming that if there was anybody voting from home, it was fraud. But they were blowing up mailboxes full of votes in the black side of town. So the suppression is real. And we got to face the reality that there are some people who, I think somebody said that, there was a quote I heard, if you're not willing to cheat, you don't want to win bad enough. That's how bad they want to win. So that's what we're dealing with. So with that being the case, we cannot shy away from the fact that this system is very vulnerable, but
we have to use the tools we have so that we don't have to go to that extreme of dealing with radicalized racist white folks who are blowing up trucks for no reason on Christmas Day. And very little consequence. Whereas us going to vote, we're being put in jail to vote. So this is a reality we have to face, and we have to slowly make some changes towards doing something about it.
Exactly. And it was crazy to me that even if they disrupted the mail-in vote, right? But then they took it a step further, and I know in California there were multiple fake ballot boxes set up. So people were dropping off their ballot in a fake box where the vote wouldn't be counted. So they were doing things like that.
California.
And just 2016, Kemp, who was the Secretary of State during his own election, overseeing his own election that he was involved in, having over 200,000 voter registrations thrown out that were mostly black because just the smallest excuses they could find, just anything they could find to throw it out, they used to throw it out. That way those votes wouldn't count. And with the election having such a small margin, that's just disgusting, like how that actually changed the result. And the one thing is, people like John Lewis, they always spoke out against these types of actions, these types of things happening, because what do you say? If you see something, you see an injustice, I'm probably butchering the quote, but you see an injustice, you have to say something. That is your moral obligation.
Yeah, and to allow it just to happen, you are complicit in it continuing. And so to have someone from the civil rights movement in a position where he can listen to what's going on behind closed doors and put some input on it, and whenever that input is not heard, bring it to the public and let us know that we need to be paying attention and doing something about this, that, or the third. And that's really what the real impact I think John Lewis had. He kept those who could do something about the things or needed to be informed in that loop. And so we need people in position like that. So this election we have right now, that's going to be decided on the first week of January, whether or not Warnock and Ossoff take the position of two clearly trying to put this politely, people who have their own interests first before actually doing their job, like Perdue, who's under investigation for insider trading, and Kelly Loeffler, who's taking pictures with known white supremacist group leaders. This is serious. This is a big deal. I guarantee you, if they don't care about black people to the point that they'll take pictures with white supremacists, they're not going to care after they get elected about black people. So let's not kid ourselves.
So John Lewis, growing up, basically, in outside of the town, in a mostly black area, but also like whenever he went into town, into Troy, seeing it segregated and everything like that. It wasn't really until he went to Buffalo, because he had family up north too. He went to Buffalo, New York. That's the first time he really saw integration, which, as we know, there was still plenty of racism, still plenty of problems. But, to him, it was just amazing just to see the fact that, they didn't have the whites only, colored only signs. To him, that was a big leap in progress that, a lot of people in Alabama at the time couldn't even picture just that little small, change that would took no effort from white people to give them.
Right.
And then another interesting thing about his background, that he actually met Rosa Parks at 17. So, you can see how, hearing Martin Luther King speak at 15, meeting Rosa Parks at 17, you can see how other civil rights leaders or activists, how they inspired him to becoming the person that he became.
Right, and there's two stories that people hear about both Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks didn't just sit on a bus and say, I'm tired of sitting down. Her family was it was real. They what you would call a trail now is what Rosa Parks was. Yeah, she had a bonnet on her head, but she had a Glock in her pocket. They was walking around with pistols and rifles constantly under surveillance, because after she made that statement, it went national. Before then even, you had a gentleman out of South Carolina, I forget his name. He was training people on militia movements and how to protect themselves and have their gun rights in place and what to do and how to use weapons in case these people were coming around to kill them. So Rosa Parks was peeping through windows with a pistol like Malcolm X was, and nobody wants to talk about that. So you had an up close, in your face view of that as a teenager, along with MLK on the nonviolent side. So both of these influenced him heavily. And he leaned more towards Martin because of the spiritual background, but he also understood the necessity that came with self-preservation and protection, which was why he was a part of a lot of the strategic planning for security to keep everyone safe with SNCC. The whole idea to him was, it is okay to put ourselves in harm's way, but it's not okay for us to constantly be harmed. So that ass whooping he took on the Edmund Pettus Bridge was symbolic of how strongly he was committed to the nonviolent way. But at the same time, you didn't see him get his ass whooped too many more times. Because I mean, I promise you, I don't think losing consciousness is something you want to have happen over and over again, especially as a leader, allowing that to happen to other people.
Exactly. And one thing that people don't keep in mind is that, you have black people that are getting targeted by the KKK. It's cross burnings going on in front of their homes. Their families are being attacked and stuff like that. It is ridiculous to suggest that they can't defend themselves in the U.S., the home of the Second Amendment, where, every white patriot grabs a gun and everything like that. And that's what they're called, patriots. They're called patriots. That, people shower them with praise. They storm capitals armed with rifles and stuff like that, and never get them seen called terrorists or anything like that. Black people have a right to, arm themselves and protect themselves too. And I think it's very important to say that and to make sure we fight back against any negative images, because, it doesn't make sense if a white family doing it is good and a black family does the same thing, it's a bad thing. Like, no, it's just self-defense. That's all it is. So I think people still have some deprogramming to do, where they think that black people are supposed to just sit back and allow racists to attack them and allow them to get away with that, attacks on their family, things like that. So when people say they want to do nonviolent protests like John Lewis, that's not even saying don't defend yourselves. Because a nonviolent protest, the whole point, we get to get a big group of people together, whatever, and this is going to be televised. That's what MLK wanted. This is going to be televised, how evil these people are. That's not saying don't defend yourself at home. That has nothing to do with that.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, the strategy of nonviolence was very appealing, especially in his younger age before going into college. Having that influence as a teenager, wanting to, upset the system and cause some good trouble. So, moving forward, he becomes so involved at his school that he becomes the chairman of SNCC, the Southern Nonviolence Coordinating Committee. And they were pretty involved, and there was some politics going on with the civil rights movement in that era. A lot of people were like, who is MLK to come in here and tell us how to do things? We're fine with the way things are going. And then you have people like John Lewis, who wasn't a part of that group in Alabama of pastors who was going against King, reaches out to King and says, hey, we could use some leadership. How can we work with you? And what can we do to institute some kind of change here? So that was part of what led to John Lewis being one of the big six leaders that helped organize the March on Washington. But, as time would go on, the mentorship from the many leaders in the civil rights movement would start when he was putting himself in the forefront of leading change in Alabama.
Exactly. And pretty much reaching out to people like MLK, getting that mentorship, learning from him. And this is how he continued to get better as a nonviolent activist, and ended up being one of the leaders of the march against the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where, this is a very, important moment in the civil rights movement. It's been documented in the movie Selma. Pretty much, they just non-violently crossed the bridge, causing disruption. And we have to put in perspective when we say non-violent. People think, a lot of people today, especially white people, they think non-violent means that it doesn't disturb you, it doesn't disrupt you. No. You can be completely non-violent and unarmed and still cause complete disruption.
Well, maybe back then that's what they thought. But I think nowadays, what they think by non-violent is don't change anything.
Exactly.
And so it's almost like to take a knee. Let's be honest with it. That really didn't change anything. All it did was make people uncomfortable. That's really all it really did. And they didn't even want that.
They didn't even want to be uncomfortable because literally it was the most peaceful and I would say least disruptive act that Kaepernick could have done. It was take a knee, which a veteran suggested he take a knee. Okay. And yeah, exactly. And still, it got so much hatred, so much backlash, and I have to say, I say unfortunately, because it really opened my eyes to how closed-minded people really are. Now, I knew they would never accept an athlete going up there and then, having a Malcolm X shirt on, because they still see Malcolm X as controversial, dumb, but that's how people see it. So I got that, I knew that. But this small, minor act that happened, for it to be that controversial, to get that much backlash, which is just ridiculous. And I want to point out that Kaepernick was blacklisted for taking a knee during the national anthem. And Antonio Brown, another black athlete, this man has a long list, or a rap sheet of all types of issues, including attacking a delivery driver, being accused of sexual assault, and then texting a woman a picture of her kids, and like as a threat, and just this. He threw a punch at the general manager of the Raiders. Another player had to stop him. Just this long list of over 40 different things that happened in the span of a year, and the NFL just welcomed him back with welcome arms. It's just crazy to see what the priorities are. Or Richie Incognito, the player that has been proven to be both racist and sexist. He left his teammate a long racist voicemail. Teammate ended up leaking it because he was so offended. And it was this big controversy about it. I think pretty much he got kicked off the team, had to spend less than the season, because it wasn't even a full season, off the NFL team, right back. Same man who also used his golf club to lift up a woman's skirt when she wasn't paying attention to him. He was trying to flirt with her. This is the same man. He's still in the NFL today. Plays for the Raiders. So it's just ridiculous that these small acts can get you blacklisted. But that just shows you that you have to have courage to do these non-violent, disruptive acts. Like, going across a bridge like that and you know what I'm saying, just making everything come to a standstill, because even the smallest acts get tremendous amount of backlash, death threats, and things like that. So we have to keep that in perspective when they did this, what they really put at risk. And to go from leading those types of protests to serving in Congress, again, that is a huge step to take right there, where you're going from making good trouble on the streets, taking it right to them, to making good trouble in Congress, taking it to actual House of Representatives and making good trouble there.
Right, and so now we have a blueprint for what success can look like. We hadn't had many people to go in and do this. Never mind the fact that there were several politicians that were of color, but really couldn't do anything on a national level to voice the concerns, because a lot of them, unfortunately, were killed. There's race riots that came from them speaking up. In Louisiana, congressmen speaking up on behalf of the people in the different wards not receiving the same funding as the rest of the white wards, and essentially them being murdered, and along with many other folks, this history of violence connected with racism and institutionalized segregation is a long-running story. But the difference with John Lewis is he was able to survive it, speak on it, and actually show that it's okay to take a stand and have your thoughts, your wishes, and your concerns heard. And so now we see several people across the country, especially women of color, taking this position to get in office to make changes where they live at in their community.
Exactly, it's important because basically all these people were moved to do it because they felt like, well, if not me, then who?
Who else?
Exactly, so they felt the need to come out and speak up and everything like that, even though, there was threats to their safety and everything like that. And then even today, where they're being marginalized, where, a lot of black people have gotten into positions of power, and then they feel like their own party is just kind of like, oh, we just wanted you here, you know what I'm saying, kind of as a prop to show we're not racist, but we really don't want your input. We don't want you to say you want reparations. We don't want you to say that, you know, you want these different housing policies that can help the black community. We don't want you to talk about the funding in the black schools, because then we have to talk about taxes. We don't want to do all that.
Exactly.
So they want you to be seen but not heard. So that's still to this day a huge struggle for a lot of prominent black politicians.
Right, and you gotta play to win. And so you'll see dumbasses like John Vernon. He'll jump from one side of the fence to the other whenever it benefits him. But he's playing the game of politics. Let's just face it, that's what it is. It's just a game. And so he's looking at it from the side of, let me see who's going to win. And I think he knows that Trump is going down. But financially, Trump isn't losing anytime soon. As much of a con man as he is, these racists really will give their lives, let alone their paychecks, to make sure he stays in place, even though he's responsible for over 300,000 people dying this year. The most negligent, irresponsible human being that has no apologies to give for it, who's willing to go even further with it, has that kind of support. You have people like Bernie Jones who's going to see that he's got that kind of support and try and tag along and win as long as he can. But if he would have learned anything from Herman McCain, he would have saw that this is a dumbass move, because you ain't gonna have no helicopter lift you to the hospital and get you that help you need if you get COVID like the president did.
And I just want to say, Herman Cain this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Died from COVID-19, and then whoever's running his Twitter account, which it could be, you know, staff or whatever, they're still on payroll or whatever. I really don't know. Whoever's running his Twitter account is still downplaying how dangerous COVID-19 is. I have never seen anything like this before in my life. This is brand new. Like the level of stupidity. Yeah, exactly.
Dumbassery.
It's dumbassery.
That's the only thing I can think of. That right there, that's that bullshit.
Yeah.
How you die from it? Somebody take over your account and say, oh, it wasn't that serious. To hell with them and everybody live in their house. That don't make no sense. Just out of respect for Herman McCain. A lot of what he said I don't agree with, but that's shady as hell. Like, come on now. That's supposed to be your people. And your people is just downplaying your death like that? Yo, that's nah.
So you can see that even his own life apparently didn't matter. It was all about playing politics, which is what they're doing. They're still playing politics. They made, you know, all the measures we could take against this disease political. So then it becomes an argument point instead of us just doing what we need to do to, you know, protect as many people as possible. But pretty much. Oh, go ahead.
But I was going to say, like, what you seeing them playing the game, you can play the game too. Let's be honest, being a politician doesn't pay the biggest check, but it does put you in position to make some real change. Now, I feel like they should be paid more because you're kind of setting them up to be bribed. Because, I mean, if you're responsible for deciding whether or not a city has sidewalks, or if your stuff gets evicted and put on the sidewalk, you should have some incentive to actually do your job adequately. I don't care if you're a waitress working at Waffle House or a politician. If you're not paid to do your job, you're not gonna do it. So let's make sure they have enough money to do that. But since it is a part-time job they're doing, for so many weekends, they might get paid anywhere between $15,000 to $40,000 to make some very serious decisions. Why not get people in position who can do these jobs adequately, make sure that these special interest groups that are popping up and getting these checks, like they're talking about trillions of dollars is supposed to be in this relief, but the politicians wrote the bill so that a museum can get over $1 million worth of furniture. They don't need that much money for furniture. Ain't nobody using furniture right now. It's COVID. Who's going to sit? Every time you go to a restaurant, they push to the side with these little signs on them saying don't sit here, but we about to buy $1 million of furniture for a museum? Come on now. The politicians wrote that in because the folks that are responsible for getting them elected and giving them these donations for their campaigns and paying their bills outside of the fact that they're not getting paid enough from the actual job are making the decisions for us. So we need to put people in position, we need to support them once they get in office so that they can do what they're supposed to do, so that these lobbyists don't come in and tell them, hey, you can't say that, you can't do that, because if you do, we won't support you in the next election.
Exactly. Pretty much just pay them properly, and if you want to know where to get the funding from, you can just tax the people that are paying them off, because apparently they have too much money on their hands anyway. So you pay them properly and pretty much remove money from like political ads and stuff like that. That should just be something that's paid for with tax dollars on, you know, the PBS or whatever local station like that. So that way you don't have Walmart paying somebody's campaign or something like that, where you have they sponsor ALEC, and you know ALEC, they wrote bills to the point where
that's a whole thing right there.
They didn't even change the name. They literally just handed the bill in with the ALEC logo on it and everything. They didn't even look at it, read it. They didn't care. The person paying them wanted to do it. But that's why we need
people with integrity in office.
I was just about to say integrity. People with integrity in office to be the ones passing these bills, to be doing these things. And you know, I think John Lewis, he really did set a great example to go from activist to 17 terms in Congress to winning the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I mean, that's a huge step, big accomplishments, great example set. And now it's just, you know, he's pretty much passed the torch on to us, for us to do the right thing.
Right, so what we do with it now is completely up to us. And I think we need to be a little more aggressive, a little more vocal in making these changes happen.
Exactly. And I also think we need to be more unapologetic. You know, if you have something you want to say, just say it. Don't worry about, oh, people are going to take it the wrong way. If somebody's determined to take it the wrong way, they'll take it the wrong way. So just be vocal, unapologetic, and aggressive, and then that's what we need to do in order to get any type of real change.
So just to wrap up, just to give you a sense of what it is you can take from the lesson that John Lewis gave us, is that perseverance. We are fighting an uphill fight, but it doesn't mean we can't win. This is one that you got to take one step at a time. There are many steps you can take to make a difference. Following his example, others' examples, that we can institute real change. And first and foremost, through legislation. Get involved locally with your community. It's very easy to get blinders on and to be stuck where you're at and think that this one problem I have is the only problem. But oftentimes we find a solution to our own problems by helping other people solve theirs. So you might want to find a way to get into your community and help where you can, so that you can see what it is exactly that your community needs, and even have something worth saying in the community for legislators. So even if it means showing up to a city hall meeting or running for a post, you can find that out by putting in that time to volunteer where you're at.
Exactly. And once you start learning all of the different issues in your community, you'll realize how interlocked they all are. They're all related. It's not, you know, housing isn't unrelated from, you know what I'm saying, job security, and that's not unrelated to, you know, issues with education and stuff. It all intertwines some kind of way. So get involved in your community, learn the issues, and then, like you said, that way you have something to say about local legislation. So the simple action items: vote, get involved, activism, get involved politically, just get involved in your community, period, and vote, because people fought for us to have this right for a reason.
And we've come a long way. Before, you couldn't even vote. Hell, we started a fraction of a human being. And now we have the right to say whether or not our kids have the right textbooks in their schools. And we're not saying anything about it. If we allow them to get away with this, that makes it okay for them to do it. But you have a voice, you have to use it. And those who don't have a voice or feel they don't, it is up to us to tell them and show them the way that they can too. Because many people who could be a part of this fight for justice and equality are facing poverty. They're facing the issues that come along with not knowing what rights they have and what freedoms they have to make sure they have the resources that are available to them that they don't know anything about. Educating ourselves not only on the political side but financially. Many of the woes that we have in the system as far as housing and credit and all that stuff comes completely down to financial literacy. So knowing how to play the system against itself financially will give people a leg up to be able to take advantage of the legal side of it. So all these different things not being in place, we have more of a battle than we really need. Whereas if we just educate ourselves slightly, a lot of the stuff that is a problem will go away by itself. And to do what we're doing, you can do too. It doesn't take you to just all out, just put everything you got into the fight. Maybe you just have 4 hours a week. Just start with maybe even 2 hours, where you just give those hours to a cause that you think could help. Us here at the Justice for Georgia would gladly accept any help you got. I mean, if you could come and help with protesting, fundraising, informing people about the different rights they have in their community about voting, connected to the different families that have been affected by the violence of the police. Your help would be greatly appreciated. Come out, support us at a fish fry. Throw a fish fry and help us out. We are open to any help that you can give. Nothing's stopping you from making a difference, even if it's just a small thing like 2 hours of your time. If you can get more than that, awesome. But start somewhere. Everybody's looking for different causes in their community that can have some help with it, whether or not it be people with COVID relief. A lot of these families who have been affected by this police violence, they need help, especially now during COVID times, because it's a lot more difficult to get justice navigating the system right now. So we all need each other. We got. Step in where you can, find a way to make a difference, because every little bit helps.
Exactly. I don't think I could have even said it better myself, but just want y'all to think of every single person that says, I care, I wish there was something I could do to help, instead of just saying that, would just spend 2 hours of their time, or just donate $10 or $20. We're talking about a huge difference in organizations that are fighting for justice. Like, they have way more involvement, way more funding. They can get a lot more things done. So I think with that being said, we'll go ahead and wrap this episode up. This was episode 6 about John Lewis. This is the Justice for Georgia podcast. My name is Johnny.
I'm Mr. Ambitious.
Signing off.